Hello YouTube and welcome to the first episode of a series that I call A Jack of All Trades, a series of miscellaneous videos that I'll be doing about video games. Now, what does this mean, you ask? Well, as the title suggests, I'll be doing a little bit of everything relating to video games, from top 10 lists to theories to reviews. I might even do a let's play once in a while. To give you an idea of what kind of games I'm into, this first episode will just be a list of my favorite games. Now, most people do a top 10 list or something like that, but let's be honest, it's hard making a list of your favorite games, and even more so to put them in a certain order. And since I love games as much as I do, I felt bad that a few of them didn't quite make the cut. So as a quick rule, I'll only be using one game per series on this list, otherwise 4 or 5 would probably dominate this entire countdown, and of course there may be some spoilers, but I'll annotate when to skip for the next part of the countdown. So without any further delay, here's a list of my top 15 favorite games of all time. Number 15. Yep, you can probably tell what this song means. Katamari Damacy. Pretty weird as far as first entries go, but I think what draws me into this game is just the simplicity. I mean, what's the story? Well, your dad, the king of all cosmos, went on a drunken rampage and destroyed all the stars in the sky. Then it's your job to help him rebuild the stars by rolling up a bunch of random junk and throwing it up into the sky. And yeah, that's it. Not a whole lot else going on in this game. Your early levels start you out small, growing to about a meter high, and eventually you're rolling up buildings, cities. Hell, in one game you can just say fuck it and start rolling up the whole galaxy. It's a strange but really fun game that just revolves around making the biggest pile of junk to make into a star. Throw in some bright colors, fun designs, and relaxing background music, and you have the makings for one of the most unique games out there, as well as one of my favorite pastime games. Number 14. Mirror's Edge. Talk about a surprise. A high-speed first-person platforming shooter game developed by EA? By every stretch, I should hate this game. But as I said, this game is probably one of the biggest surprises I've ever played. It not only gave me something I'd never seen done before, but I dare say they did it relatively well. In addition to the fluid high-speed gameplay, the overall stylizing of this game is really cool. The overall look of the city and characters is definitely a good nod to the dystopian utopian stories, and speaking of which, the story's interesting enough to where you want to know what's going on. If I had never been gifted this game on Steam, I probably would have never played this, and I'm really glad I did. I did hear the console version of it wasn't that great, and if I were to make any recommendations, I do think it runs a lot better on the PC, so I'd say give it a shot if you can run it. And of course, as you might have guessed, after seeing E3's trailer for Mirror's Edge 2, I can safely say I'm pretty excited for that one too. All I can say about this game that I hadn't already is, well done EA. You've actually made a game I liked. But if you mess up the second one, EA, you're dead to me, you hear me? You're dead, you're dead! Number 13. Super Mario Galaxy. The 3D Mario platforms will always have a special place for me. 64 was the first game I ever completed, but this one I honestly think might be my favorite. What makes this stand out for me would probably be the overall scale of this game. The way the game is structured around a giant observatory that's overlooking a multitude of galaxies just makes it feel gigantic. Not only that, but the platforming is always fun, the power-ups are inventive, and there's just this pleasant feel throughout the entire game, especially the soundtrack. I could hear that theme song for the Gusty Garden Galaxy over and over. It's just a nice sounding theme fit for an adventure like this, and the soundtrack just makes it an overall nice feeling game. Not only gameplay, but the actual story is nice too. And I don't mean between Mario, Peach, and Bowser, we all know that one. But I mean the little things like the story behind the observatory and who Rosalina really is. In one of the buildings of the observatory, there's a story being told through little kids' drawings explaining who Rosalina really was and how she became the mother of the stars. I won't give anything away about it, but it's a pretty touching story and not one I'd expect from a series like Mario. Overall, it's one of my favorite Wii games, as well as one of my favorite games. Number 12. Aw yeah, Banjo-Kazooie. So here's a fun fact, I actually didn't play this game till 2013 as a graduation present from a friend. Not that I didn't want to play it, it's just that growing up I had a very limited access to games that I wanted to play, so I just played what I had. My point is, so unlike most of what's on this list, this game didn't exactly have the luxury of being on the nostalgia float that some of these others had. But having played it now makes me wish it was, because I really feel like I missed out. I'd always liked Rare's games, and I think it's up there with Donkey Kong and Conker's Bad Fur Day as one of the great 3D Rareware platformers. Though I guess that's not saying much, since it's just those games and... yeah, okay, never mind. It's still a great game, and it's a shame I just started playing it when I did, because it really feels like I missed out on this growing up. Well, as I say, better late than pregnant.
Hey.
Number 11. Shadow of the Colossus. As if I really need to explain what makes this game so good. This is one of the most, if not the most, for lack of a better word, colossal, haha, see what I did there? Epics to be put on the PS2. One thing you'll hear me say a lot as we get further down the countdown is how good the story is, and this one is definitely no slouch in that department. It's mostly shrouded in mystery and slowly reveals more details the further you go into the story, and making you question whether what you're doing is really the right choice. It builds and builds to a point of where you discover the plot twist of what you've been doing and what it's all for, and I won't give it away for the sake of ruining the plot twist, but that's where the real emotional heart of the game is. Now, story aside, how's the rest of the game? Well, I may as well talk about the best part of it, the scale. Seriously, this game is huge. When I first played this game, it was on a huge widescreen TV, and that's how this kind of game is meant to be played. The first time you climb onto the Colossi, the first boss, you can feel the weight and intensity it takes to stay on, almost like you're actually on its back, holding on for dear life. The energy, the build-up, each fight just becomes more and more intense as you eventually move on to the biggest one of them all, and just... look at this! With the way it combines its story elements and its gameplay, it's considered by many to be one of the best games ever made. In fact, it's a game a lot of people are using when debating whether or not video games should be considered a higher form of art, and yeah, I think that's a pretty appropriate use for it, because in a lot of ways, many do consider this game to be a real landmark as it showed just how much the PlayStation 2 could handle. If you haven't played it, definitely check it out. There was an HD remake for it that just came out a few years ago. I haven't played that version myself, but if it really means seeing this in HD, then yeah, it's definitely worth playing if you haven't already. Number 10. Final Fantasy IV. When people usually mention the quintessential Final Fantasy game, this is usually what I think of. I know most people's favorites usually falls between 6 and 10, and I can understand why, they all got their unique things to them. I like this one because it's a perfect blend of both Western fantasy, but still has a lot of old Final Fantasy elements. It's pretty much everything I wanted in a Final Fantasy. Different classes, a simple battle system, interesting characters, and a surprisingly good story for the time this came out. I mean, yeah, I know it's a remake, but it's a remake for a game that came out in 1991. The story is about a Dark Knight, yeah, that's literally what the class is called, who's not sure if what he's doing is for the right cause, but is too scared to disobey his king's orders. When one of his missions goes awry, he gets separated from his group and discovers that not everything in the world is as great as it seems. From there, it's a story of a Dark Knight walking the path of redemption, following a ritual to climb a mountain where he becomes a paladin and saving the world from an evil that threatens to destroy it. When people mention the stereotypical Final Fantasy game, this is usually what I think of. A lot of people like 7 and 6 better, and I can understand why, but 4 will always be my favorite. Oh, and speaking of Dark Knights, I mean seriously, the main antagonist looks like a medieval Batman. Seriously, that's fucking awesome. Number 9. Metroid Prime 3. This is without a doubt my favorite first-person shooter. It counts. Anyway, Metroid Prime 3 took what I liked about the last two Prime games and worked it into something much greater. Samus, who reacquired the Phazon suit and just saved the Galactic Federation station from an ambush by the space pirates, ends up being knocked out of commission shortly after and wakes up to find that the Phazon suit may have spread to other members, including some of her fellow bounty hunters. So it's up to her to travel through 3 gigantic planets and save them all. Meanwhile, Dark Samus is controlling the Phazon energy and is using it to ultimately corrupt her and destroy her. I think what I like most about this game is the overall feeling of isolation and scale that lingers in this game. After you leave the Federation, you're pretty much on your own for most of the game. You gotta hunt down your fellow bounty hunters and save them from being corrupted. Kinda. Shooting down aliens and just being the galactic badass that we all know and love. It's a shame that there hasn't been any new Metroid Prime since this one. It ended on a total cliffhanger. If Other M is the reason that we have this long Metroid hiatus, then I will be really upset. But hey, it's Nintendo, they wouldn't shelf something just like that, right? Right? Nintendo? Number 8. Batman Arkham City. I remember when Arkham Asylum came out, everyone was blown away with the quality. The style? Perfect. The combat system? Awesome. The voice acting? Also perfect. Now they actually got most of the original cast from the 90s TV show to voice most of the characters. It was a game that raised the bar and raised it high, not just for comic book games, but for sandbox games as a genre. Mostly. Two of the downsides I had with this game was one, the boss fights, which were just sorta generic boss fights. I mean, the Joker goes on a roid rage, Poison Ivy feels like something out of PlanetSide 2, and with the Scarecrow, I don't know, it just kinda felt like I was playing a 3D version of Limbo. And the second reason was, there wasn't as many villains as I would've liked. I mean, yeah, you had the Joker, Harley, the Scarecrow, and Poison Ivy, but what about guys like Mr. Freeze, Two-Face, Ra's al Ghul, the Penguin, Catwoman? So many just got sidelined. That being said, this is where Arkham City shined. Not only did it have all those villains I previously mentioned and more, but the bosses were completely fixed. With Mr. Freeze, you have to constantly change your strategy because his suit keeps adapting to what you do to fight him. You have to solve Riddler's Saw-style traps to catch him, there's a trippy fight sequence with Ra's al Ghul, everything is done right, including the story, which, hey, maybe I should talk about. So it takes place about half a year after Arkham Asylum, and Hugo Strange mysteriously got clearance to build a big super prison in the middle of Gotham. Bruce Wayne attempts to start a campaign to get rid of it, but ends up getting captured himself. Through this, he finds out that Strange somehow learned that Bruce Wayne is Batman, and that if he tries to stop him, he'll make sure everybody knows it. From there, he's caught in the middle of a gang war between Two-Face, the Penguin, and the Joker. By the way, Mark Hamill reprises his role as the Joker from Arkham Asylum in the cartoons, and he puts out a fantastic final performance. To me, I still think he's the best one out there. This game is what I was hoping for with Arkham Asylum, and it delivered all my expectations from beginning to end. I could have seen some of the Arkham games as something like an animated special, but the way the gameplay and storytelling works off of each other in Arkham City just makes it a perfect match for gaming. Some people consider Arkham Asylum to be the best comic book game out there, but to me, I think this game is better than Asylum in every way. And don't get me wrong, I liked Arkham Asylum, but if Asylum revolutionized the comic book video game, then I think Arkham City perfected it, easily earning its place on the countdown. Number 7. Silent Hill 2. This seems to make it on a lot of people's favorite game lists, and, well, yeah, it's a good game. It's about James Sutherland, a man who lost his wife but receives a strange letter from her calling him to Silent Hill, his own personal hell where he sees monstrous manifestations of his inner lust, wrath, and memories. He comes across a few people, and from there it's a battle to see if he can conquer his fears and guilts of his past or eventually succumb to the madness and become one of those monsters himself. One of the great things about this game is its atmosphere. It gives a great mix of horror and suspense while also mixing isolation and surprisingly melancholic tones, kinda like how Shadow of the Colossus felt. The story is definitely fun to play around with, having different endings, but the highlight for me is definitely the plot twist near the end, which I won't give away. This is one of Konami's earliest attempts at telling a cinematic story, and as far as horror goes, this is one of their best. Silent Hill 2 continues to be one of my favorites in the series, as well as my all-time favorite horror game. I would even say it's worth getting the entire HD collection for. Number 6. Phoenix Wright Trials and Tribulations. Whew boy, I guess I can't really talk about this without the story aspects, can I? You can't really do much else, as pretty much all these trials are connected to one big story. Anyone who's played this game will definitely tell you this is easily the darkest of the Phoenix Wright games. Themes about murder, suicide, revenge, all of it's presented in its typical format, a bit cartoony but still strong enough to get the message across. The main antagonist is Godo, who was poisoned and put into a coma and then woke up years later to find that the woman he loved was murdered and then the woman he wanted revenge for poisoning him was already trialed and put to death. And with Phoenix Wright being heavily involved in both cases, he blames him for both of these. He wants to prove to himself that Mia left a worthy successor and also forgive himself for not being able to protect her in the first place. This is what makes good drama. Godo's not just some villain, in fact he's not even that much of a jerk. He has a motivation and it's one we can clearly understand and identify with. Not only is he a good character, but we also get visits from characters from the old games too. And it's not just a throwaway cameo, you see them grow, you see them change and become different people. I think if I were to nitpick the game a little bit, I'd probably have to say while the story is good, I think it focuses a little too much on the story. And I'm not some hardcore gamer type who plays everything on expert mode or anything like that, I just think they put a lot more effort into their storytelling than they did the actual puzzles and gameplay. I found the puzzles in Justice for All a lot more challenging than I did in Trials and Tribulations. That's not necessarily a bad thing because they did still do the story well, but I do feel like it could have been a little bit more balanced between story and gameplay. But instead of looking at it for what I want it to be and looking at it for what it is, I do still think it's a really well done game. It's a great story with great characters, and while the gameplay isn't spectacularly difficult or anything, it's still fun enough to keep things interesting. Thanks for watching part 1 of my first episode. Come back next week and I'll be looking over the remaining top 5 of my all-time favorite games. If you like what you saw, don't forget to subscribe and then you won't miss what my all-time favorite game is. So until then, my name is Jack, and that was my trade. See ya.